Hi, I'm Maestro Hamilton here with the Blue Morpho podcast Through the Vine, and today we have a conversation for you with Mike, who takes us through an incredible journey of ayahuasca ceremonies and into San Pedro directly. Imagine talking about a 36-hour ceremony going deep into personal realizations with God, wringing himself out to the subatomic quantum levels, purging everything that needs to come up. We talk about the importance of purging and what it was like going back 11 years ago to his first ceremonies and working with various centers and shamans. This is a story for you, and I can't wait to share it with you. So welcome to Through the Vine with Mike.
So my most profound ayahuasca experience was just a couple nights ago. Really started getting into the medicine and started off a little slow for me. Really was just starting to connect, allowing the energy to start moving. It was once you had called in all the guides, all the spirits, all the support, it instantly hit me. And it's, from my experience, it's like getting hit with the purity of God, the purity of energy, to where it's held in such an intense space that it starts to purify my being at every level, from cellular, molecular. Every part of it starts to get wrung out, starts to get so cleansed that everything starts to spin together and twist until it starts to remove every bit of resistance, every bit of cultural conditioning, every bit of fear or anxiety or hesitation or resistance, anything that's ever been there that's not pure God, that's not pure intentionality, that's not pure love, just starts to get brought out. And in that experience, it's, to me, there's not even necessarily a vision with it. It goes into such a overwhelm of a spiral of everything twisting in that I kind of pull back into a different spot in my own consciousness or my own reality, to where then that just manifests and gets bigger and bigger until it just continues to purge out in rings from every cell. It's not even feeling like it's coming from my stomach. It doesn't feel like it's coming from my mind. It feels like a cellular exchange and replacement of anything that's not pure.
From the cellular, does it feel like it's coming out of you cellular, or does it feel like it's coming in and concentrating and coming out your mouth physically? What's that experience like in that deep form of purge?
It feels like there's an exchange, like it's permeating through me, and then as it comes in, it presses everything else out.
Wow.
Almost like Play-Doh goes through a machine and then presses out the other end, and it just continues to extract until each cell is completely cleansed, and it leaves you with the truest sense of liberation. When everything is stripped away and you're left with just stillness, just isness, you can just be. There is no noise, there is no reservations or concern or voice or ego. It's just presence and isness.
Is there any contextualization for the space around you?
It feels like a high pitch ringing, like a tuning fork. It feels like that energy is vibrating, and the vibrating is what's working through my body. And so it's completely all encompassing and surrounding, to where you couldn't get away from it if you wanted. To me, it's not uncomfortable, it's not challenging, it's not scary. Yeah, there's uncomfortableness with it coming out, but it feels so good. It feels so amazing that personally, I don't want the purge to stop. It's my favorite part about ayahuasca is the purging and the coming back to true self.
That's beautiful. When you're in it and the purge is happening, what's the mental contextualization during that period of time? Is anything happening?
To me, it's a layer of bliss. It's an overwhelming, my essence knows what's happening, and my essence is in an overwhelming sense of joy. I'm so excited and so elated when it's happening, but it's physically very disorientating and confusing. So I go in waves of being able to find my bucket, kind of knowing where I am in space and time, having a relation to my sense around me, and then it gets pulled back into a complete, almost like washing over my senses and washing over my ability to perceive either externally or internally, and it's just replaced with this process where I feel like I'm spinning inwards as everything is vortexing and working to be expelled.
What's your personal awareness of yourself during that time?
Brings me back to a clarity of who I am and where I've come from. It strips away the cultural conditioning of who I think I'm supposed to be or who I am. And so it's a more clarity around where I've come from and what I'm here for, and just clarity. There's so much more clarity and presence with it in a way that I've only gotten close to in one other ceremony, and I would say I got about 90% there. But with Sanctuary, it brought me all the way to the edge, all the way to the other side. And that to me is just so profound.
Once the purge has concluded and you've gone through it and everything's been wrung out, what happens right next?
A big sigh of relief. A big sigh of relief, a big grin, just a elated layer of ecstasy of I'm back. I'm who I'm supposed to be. All of the other nonsense that's behind the scenes that causes any of that hesitation or reservation or doubt or takes me out of the present moment is gone, and there's just presence and gratitude.
As that matures, like over the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour, as it goes deeper into the night, what's the progress like?
For me, it allowed me personally to start going through different contexts and different timelines in my past, in my history. I was able to start remembering people who I've no longer have been around, who I've lost connections with. And it almost gave me a sense of, I almost felt bad for the people that I haven't been around, who I can see who are struggling, and recognizing the potential for the space I can hold for them. And to me, it almost feels like there's an abandonment that I've left them and been able to recognize in hindsight where they are struggling within themselves, because I was able to purge out a lot of that struggle within myself. So I started replaying the people who I wanted to come in contact with when I get back, who I wanted to reach out to, who I wanted to offer support with, and then just the amount of people that I just have the massive urge to hug. Just that really long, like genuine hug where you're just taking 3 or 4 or 5 really long, deep breaths and just kind of melding with that person. That was the biggest thing that I want to do when I get back to the States, is go find those people and just let them know that I see them, that I apologize if I haven't been there for them in a way that I could have, and want to try to spread some of this to them, even if they don't have the full conceptualization around what it is. I know I can convey that through the energy of being in their presence and holding space and genuinely seeing them with love and compassion and without judgment or frustration for where they're at.
When you're in that state of clarity and you're connecting with them, are you seeing them? Do they look like people? Is it just memories of them and thoughts of them? Is there a kind of a deeper psychic connection or awareness?
It's a little bit of everything. Some of it is different times in my life that I can remember them. Some of it is me seeing them now, connecting with who they were, and then connecting with who I feel like they are now and where they're at within themselves. A lot of it is there's a layer of fear or insecurity that I feel from them. That just makes me, again, want to reach out and try to be that support. But there's a very, very tangible connection that I feel with them.
And when you're going into the purge, that's going to open up this level of connection and awareness. Are you aware of what you know has to come out of you, or do you just know there's something there?
I just know there's something there. So every purge is a little bit different for me. In the ceremony that I'm speaking of, it started off without the physical purge of me throwing up. It started off more as an energetic purge, which is pretty common for me. So it was a lot of really heavy breathing, really deep breathing, some twisting and contorting, just trying to get the energy to get kicked up and start to move. And then as it was pulling up and down and almost starting to sift, if you're in a lake and you shake the bottom and all that sediment starts to come up, all of that started to rise in my body, and then it reached a critical mass, and then that's where everything twisted and just retched out and physically started to come out.
Physically come out. I think it's really important to talk about this because a lot of people are scared of purging. And a lot of people won't come to the medicine because they've heard about it.
Yeah.
And they've also heard, or they think at least, that it's happening because they drank something that wasn't good for them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to talk about the benefits that somebody gets from going through this experience. And I've always thought of it as a miraculous release. It's something that once it's gone, you can't believe you had that stuff in you, and thought it was something that you want to embrace, especially if what you know you have in you is something holding you back or a block or something toxic, you know. So I think it's really important. Is there anything scary in it as it's coming out?
To me, not at all. It's genuinely my favorite part. I come to ayahuasca to purge. When I first started, I thought I was coming for the visions. I thought I was coming for more of the experience around me. I've had a handful of really powerful visions, but to me, those aren't where the magic is. The magic is when you can really cross that threshold, again, that you've provided in Sanctuary, where you take it to that next level. But there's nothing fearful about it. It feels great, and afterwards, you can't believe that was in you. You can tangibly feel a difference from that heaviness or that denseness that comes out.
What does it feel like, you know, later in the night or the next day? So you go through seeing your friends, you want to connect, you know that you now can because the stuff that's in you is out, it's gone. What does it feel like to, you know, kind of land from that, and then what happens?
It's the process of following through with it. Because in the medicine, it's always easy to have grandiose ideas of what you want to do and want to follow through. It's once you get back into the real world, following through with that. I had another experience years ago where I hadn't talked to my dad in 4 or 5 years, and had some ceremonies that gave me a full contextual understanding of where he was and what had happened to him when he was younger that really stunted his mental and emotional growth for his ability to show up as a father. And it was as soon as I got back home, first thing I did was call him. And I was like, hey, I was like, it's Mikey. He's like, Mikey, who? I was like, your son. He's like, oh, I'm like, I want to know if you want to get together. He goes, I would love that, absolutely. So it was going and making those mends and making those connections and not holding anybody in a space to where they weren't good enough or there was an issue or a frustration, and trying to help lift them out of that and then hold them in that new light and hold them in that new space. So that's going to be my work when I get back, is going and reaching out. And it's still some family members as well, some friends. It's people that there's, for one reason or another, there was tumultuous things that happened that I decided to remove myself from, that I still could have done more to be a support structure.
I think a lot of us resonate with having difficult family structures, difficult family relationships. You just mentioned your father. How has ayahuasca changed that for you and in some ways helped that?
It allowed me to reconnect with him. So we still never fully had what you would consider a normal father-son relationship. He didn't have that mindset to be able to manage that, but I didn't have any frustration or judgment. When I was around him, I would see him for where he was and could still love him and not judge him. And just knowing that he could reach out to me and he could see me, and the amount of joy that would bring him, even if he didn't have the ability to really show up in the way that normally you would expect somebody to. He actually passed just a couple years ago. So it gave me a really great opportunity to mend that relationship before that actually happened, which to me is, I'm extremely grateful for, because I would have, at this point with this medicine experience, would have felt a lot worse coming to this realization and knowing that I left him in a place feeling like he couldn't ever reach out or talk to his son, and that his son wanted nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I hear that. We've worked with a lot of people who actually had that experience, they didn't get to say goodbye. They didn't get to fix it. And we try to facilitate that connection once we're in pure consciousness and connecting through the energy and spirit. But I agree with you. If you get the opportunity to make amends, find your forgiveness, do anything that improves the relationships before any kind of final transition or separation, I recommend that always. I think, like you say, that is only beneficial. What happened the next morning after this great purge and series of realizations?
So that's when we went into San Pedro, which to me was amazing. The night before, when we finished ayahuasca, I was so excited to drink San Pedro, just to elongate that experience and elongate that mental, emotional state, because then it allowed me to stay in that space where I had more access to the connections and to the thoughts and to the understandings, to where I could process what was happening more, try to build a little bit more of a structure, a little bit more of a plan in my mind, in my heart, and get a little bit more out of it without kind of sliding back out of the ceremony space and then trying to conceptualize it. So it made it a lot easier for me to continue doing the work.
So just so everyone understands, there was a ayahuasca ceremony that started about 5 p.m. It went into the middle of the night, and then everyone woke up, and we started at about 8:30 in the morning with a San Pedro ceremony that then went all day. I think some people listening to that would be like, you're going to do what? For those who don't know, San Pedro is a visionary cactus. It's the visionary component is mescaline, and it's been used in the Andes for thousands and thousands of years as a great healing plant, also purgative sometimes, but just because of energy, mostly not. And really a deep connection with earth, a deep connection with yourself, a coming back to nature, a clarity, a wisdom with it, heart opening. People talk about being very aware of the chakras and the inner core energies that come to play. But I know before we did this, some of the people that I talked to, were kind of, on the more hesitant side, like, what would it be like to do a whole ayahuasca ceremony and then go right into a San Pedro ceremony? So tell everybody what that's actually like.
It left me in a state of mentally and emotionally sharp. I feel like the level of presence and the level of awareness that's there, it makes it so much easier to continue that work and not be groggy, because it gives you a little bit of energy. It helps you just manage everything that just went on and then help you process it. But it's in a very light-hearted, very easy. You can still move around, you're not disorientated, you can still eat some food, so you can refuel, you can drink water, you can drink tea. And so the whole process is very friendly for after going through a intense ayahuasca experience.
Yeah, I always found that the San Pedro was gentle, deep, and smooth.
Yeah.
And I often find that the days after ayahuasca, everything can be very bright, but there can also be a little bit of an energetic edginess.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was just really mitigated. Everything was really calm, really smooth, really grounded through that experience. What came up during it? As you say, you were going through some processes, getting clear. Did realizations come? Was there teachings that came through? What was the actual internal experience like?
So a lot of that was heavily influenced by your talks and the lectures that you were giving. I spent hours sitting on the ground listening to you talk with just tears coming out of my eyes, because it was giving me such a different context to the lessons and the experiences that you've had, that you were sharing, to where it just hit at such a soul level that it just resonated, and I could feel more and more of my heart filling and more of a presence, and that was just coming through just hot tears that were just constantly flowing. It wasn't like a hard cry, but it was just a constant flowing and moving of energy, and that was the way that I was still purging in that moment of the recognition of how powerful God is and how powerful love is and how powerful this universe and this experience is.
What I thought was really special about yesterday's ceremony was that we were really working with the spirit that's right here, and really working with divinity that's right here, or God that's right here, the universe that's right here. And there's so many stories about trying to get out there, or there's some veil that we have to get through, or there's some blockage keeping us from it. And my favorite form of practice is the one that's right inside us, It's where we put the medicine. It's where our mind is. It's where, to me, we first find spirit because we are it. And I felt that too all day. It felt like in that ceremony we called spirit in a really big way to the Maloka, and it really did show up. There were winds and lightning, and it was, the forest was rumbling, and we were all in this grid of energy and quantum and light. I call it the light matrix, and spirit was rolling through it, and it was glorious. And so during the day I wanted to really work with what we had right here. As that goes into the evening, because the experience of San Pedro will go all day, or some people do all night ceremonies. They drink in the evening and then it goes all night. What was that like in the transition from day to night and then the conclusion of the ceremony?
So I ended up drinking a second cup around 2 o'clock. And so mine went a little bit longer, but I was also had the opportunity to get a massage at 3 o'clock, and that was life-changing. The amount of energy and tension and release that was able to get pushed out of my body, being in that state and being more hyper-aware and being able to breathe into the body work, leaving that, I was just in a state of electrical buzz to where everything was just so heightened. And then as the evening continued, it was a very slow, calming descent to where it was very peaceful, it was very relaxed, but still really sharp mentally, emotionally, was just being able to be present with the whole rest of the evening and the time spent with the people here and everyone. So it was a really, really great, soft way of coming down from those ceremonies.
Yeah, one, that's beautiful, and I'm so glad. Second, I thought it was really nice during the San Pedro was the ability for everyone to bond.
Yeah.
Often after ayahuasca retreats, people do a lot of talking, but it's a lot of mind talking about what happened and trying to process it through the mental experience. And I thought that San Pedro really offered a kind of just connection and spirit between people to go deeper than that in the nature of conversation. I thought that was a beautiful way to also bring that very long landing to it. Sometimes ayahuasca have pretty abrupt return. So for everyone who's listening, let's zoom way out. Who are you and what brought you to Aya?
So I'm Mike. I'm from Michigan. I first started my ayahuasca journey 11 years ago. I used to get really, really bad anxiety. Personal anxiety, social anxiety, everything, every which way was just a prison of anxiety, to the point where it led me to take a trip down to Peru on my own and find a place out of Iquitos and went into the middle of the jungle with people I didn't know, with a medicine I didn't know, just to try to get past the discomfort that I was in every day. And my journey down there really helped eliminate that, at least for a couple years. I have gone down multiple times. I've worked with 7 different shamans. This was my 20th ceremony the other night, and it's really hard finding a good resort or a good center. It's hard finding a good shaman. It's hard finding the right medicine and people that are doing it the right way. And that's one thing I really appreciate about this place is everywhere else I've gone, I was able to drink the medicine, but it seemed, as much as it can be a surface layer with ayahuasca, it seemed so much more surface layer to where you were dealing with small chunks of things that were going on, but it was really hard to get to the crux of what's really going on. And so after I had my first set, I got fairly close and then started coming back looking to go that little bit deeper, and it always just kind of fell short. There wasn't really the connection, and then it led me over the last 11 years to try to find my own conceptual understanding of reality. That took me into yoga, it took me into meditation, it took me into a bunch of different modalities, and it allowed me to build a pretty good structure. But then coming here, everything I spent the last 11 years looking for and working to develop is just freely given. It's just talked about, it's explained in such a soft, playful, nonchalant, just given in a way that I've never seen given at any other center before. So I was extremely grateful for that, because it took a lot of the concepts and understanding that I knew and then was all compounded and built on top of, and gave so much more context to this experience and what's going on with us, and the breakdown of how we got here, how things are structured, where we get tripped up, how we get lost in our own mind. And then that whole process is just allowed even more of the unlocking of the mind and the unlocking of the heart and the soul than I even knew was possible. And again, that's with doing 18 other ceremonies before I even came here.
When you first had really bad anxiety and you came to ayahuasca, what's it like leading up to an ayahuasca ceremony with unknown people and unknown shamans and unknown medicine and anxiety? That sounds like an edgy transit. What's that like?
Oh, I personally had a very rough first go of it. The very first night I got down there, I had a dream with ayahuasca to where I woke up in the middle of the night and ran outside and purged, ended up throwing up off the balcony. So I started a little shaky and then did combo in the jungle and got a very, very strong jungle version of the medicine with no liquids, no fluids, nothing to drink. Went into a little bit of anaphylactic shock. I'm extremely sensitive to combo, I found out. So that that process of purging really messed my throat up. It was very raw, very swollen. So then going into the first night of ayahuasca, it's like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, this is not a good idea. And then the first night was really about my dad and about giving me the context of where he was and being able to see him almost from a third person perspective of what he went through, and then getting to emotionally and energetically feel what he went through and where he was, and that wasn't anything he wanted to be a part of. And then that led into my other ceremonies, which showed me that a lot of my anxiety came from my parents' divorce, that they got divorced when I was 14, and between my mom, my dad, and my sister, none of them knew what to do. None of them knew how to handle it. So I took it upon myself to try to be the rock for everybody and to try to be strong for everybody and not let any of that out. So I just harbored all of that anxiety and that stress and that not knowing what's going to happen, and then them splitting up and not knowing where I'm going to land, and that whole process, it just got locked up inside of me. And so it took 2 more ceremonies after that, and actually a woman that was there who started to work on pulling a thread where she was just asking me questions about my past, and she finally got to a certain point where like, and it just pulled it out, and then I started purging, and I thanked her afterwards, and her response was, yeah, just felt compelled. I felt like I was pulling on a string, and I was just asking questions, and it brought my awareness to the understanding of what was stuck. And then once that hit, it all came up, and that release finally happened.
Amazing. How did you first hear about ayahuasca as a potential solution for this?
So I had heard about ayahuasca probably 15 or 16 years ago. I didn't feel like I was ready for it. I'd come across it with some podcasts. I had read some books about it. It was something I always felt like I wanted to do, but I didn't fully have the full calling. And I was at a point in my life where I was actually in the process of trying to buy a house. Every single thing fell through in the weirdest ways possible. And then once it completely fell through, I just had this urge where I was like, I need to use this money to go to Peru. And within 3 weeks, I was down in the jungle and just followed the calling, and it got really loud and really powerful. And that's what really drew me down there. And then as it was getting closer, I started trying to listen to more people. Listen to Amber Lyon was somebody who I listened to her experience of going through a lot of trauma and then taking ayahuasca and being able to hear a difference in her voice. So a couple other people, I listened to them and I could hear a tangible change and who they were before with how they came back.
You said that you felt the call and the call got loud, and people ask me all the time, how do you know if you're called? So what is that? What is that calling? What does it mean for a calling to get loud?
It just starts to get pervasive in your mind of this, I need to go. And it almost is like, if I don't do this, I'm going to miss this opportunity. And then you start getting synchronicities that start lining up. It was the same way when I got called to come this time. I started just having this gut feeling like it's time. And then some of the songs that I connected with when I came down last time started randomly coming on as soon as I would think about doing ayahuasca. Or certain situations would line up perfectly to where it's like, it couldn't have been easier to follow the crumbs to get here, but it's just, you feel like something is actually pushing you from inside to outside, from your mind to your heart. At least for me, it was a very tangible, I need to do this.
Incredible. walk us back to before coming down here this time. What is drawing you back after 11 years and these different medicines and these different places and these different shamans? What were you thinking about, and what's been going on in your life that would make you come looking for this now?
I was losing my ability to hold space for myself, and I was losing my ability to hold space for others. After my original time of doing ayahuasca, I've made a point to try to meet every interaction I have with somebody, and at the very worst, leave it neutral. Never leave or give any bad energy to any situation. Best case, I'm always leaving somebody in more of a positive space than they were prior, whether they're aware of it or not. Always trying to lift them up, always trying to see them, and I could feel that starting to slip. There was a lot going on with my work to where everybody was in a lot of stress, and I'm the one who's in charge of everything. So everybody's stress was all coming to me in trying to support each person, and then trying to support other people in my life was getting to the point where it was making it really challenging for me to be able to show up. And I know once I start to slip and I start to get out of alignment, I'm gonna lose the ability to control what's going on in my life. Not that I'm trying to control everything, but the ability to co-create, I think, might be a better way of phrasing it.
You mentioned work. What do you do for work?
I am the director of a vertically integrated cannabis facility.
What's leadership of that like?
I'm around a lot of people who I oversee all the managers of each department. So we have a cultivation space, we have a lab facility, we have a retail facility, then we have our sales and marketing team. And so everybody is trying to figure out how to make it in this very competitive market and trying to do it in a way to where they're not getting too overwhelmed, but it's hard to be able to continue to show up when you don't know how to process that's what's going on inside of you. So it's a lot of counseling, it's a lot of sitting down one-on-one, it's a lot of not only seeing them, but also working to impact the rest of the team. So holding all the managers to a certain level of accountability on, hey, this is how we talk to one another, this is how we show up, and then having to hold that space. Because if I'm not holding that, I can't expect anybody else to follow through with showing up the way that I know if we all show up and we all get on the same frequency and we can hold that same intention, the business will be unstoppable. And so when everybody's infighting or people are frustrated or people are overwhelmed, it creates disharmony. So trying to pull all that together and use that momentum to really drive it forward when other people don't have the contextual experience of what that means, what that looks like. So I'm almost trying to control this flow of energy in the background and nobody's really quite aware of what I'm doing, but I can see it, I can see where it lines up, and I can see where it starts to break apart. And so knowing that to a degree the success of the company and all of the people who work there and their family, all of their lives are on the line. So trying to orchestrate that in a way that can still look out and protect all the families that are there.
This is a natural process in our lives. Lots of stress, lots of responsibility, lots of tasks. And I like to think that these kinds of plant medicines are a great reset. When you feel like the stress is starting to get into and you're slipping, how does that start manifesting inside you? How are you feeling so someone else could recognize in them, oh, that's a reason to go, use this medicine. This can help me.
Start losing control of my thoughts. Start losing control of my compassion. Start losing control of my ability to show up and engage with people, to where normally if somebody's doing something that's incorrect or handling a situation wrong, it's really easy for me to see through that and support them. But if I start to slip back, I start to get more agitated. I start to justify and warrant holding somebody in a negative space. I start to warrant why, okay, I don't need to have compassion for that person. I just need things to work. And so it's almost just pulling back my energy instead of pushing it out and trying to maintain and work with people. I start to get more stingy with my energy because I start to lose the capacity to take care of myself. And then when I lose that, I lose the capacity to take care of the people around me, and then even the people I care about. So even with my wife, who's absolutely amazing, I can feel when I start to retract from her, even if it's not rude or I'm not being aggressive, I can feel I'm withdrawing some of my love because I don't have the capacity in me to keep pushing it out, and it becomes more selfish to where I have to protect myself is how it starts to feel.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you resonate with that, it's important to understand that plant medicines are incredible tools for working with all of that. And you work with all of that at the same time. It's not piecemeal, it's not talk therapy, it's not a little catharsis. The plant medicines have a way of shifting us in our mind, in our heart, in our energy, and in our consciousness to ultimately grab all of that at the same time, which can be whelming in a night, and it can take you to that, that tough place. But all these things that would seem like such a myriad of stressful and difficult situations inside the family, inside the home, inside the relationship, with the wife, and potentially with the kids, etc. The past, the self, can all be addressed at the same time in a ceremony. Okay, so you got all of that, and you decide to come. What are you thinking on your way down? You're taking flights to get here. What's going on? Walk us through that.
It's funny because I'm very comfortable in the medicine, and so when I'm in it, I love it. But there's always reservation and trepidation before. Every time I get on a plane, it's I shouldn't be doing this. Something about me starts saying this isn't right. Like, I don't want to go through with it. So I have to have a layer of steadfastness of just keep going, knowing that I can trust in the medicine, and knowing once I get here and knowing once I get into it, it's all going to work itself out. And so that's where I get the biggest reservation, is the couple days before, the couple days in Iquitos, the couple days before I get here, even the first day getting here. It's like, if I can get through a ceremony, I know I'm going to enjoy it. I know I'm going to love what happens afterwards, but there's just that reservation that I have every time beforehand. I've done it enough that I know there's nothing to fear. I know that it's going to be a great experience. It's going to be worth it. So if you do end up wanting to come and you feel that trepidation, it is normal. It is something I still struggle with. And again, I love the medicine. I love being in that space. And whenever I come, again, before I leave, when I get the inspiration, I'm so excited. And as soon as I make that commitment, I get on the plane, I'm like, oh no, what am I doing? I don't know if this is the right move.
I've always thought that deep in your subconscious and unconscious what's going to be purged.
Yeah.
And that stuff starts vibing.
Yeah, that's the resistance that's trying to come out. It's also the test of the universe. Whenever you know something, it's going to test you to make sure you're really willing to go through that commitment.
Yeah.
So to me, it's one of those tests to where you get that opportunity to back out, but you just have to keep going forward. And if you keep going forward, that's the way through.
So this week is first ayahuasca, followed by San Pedro, and then a rest day, and then ayahuasca followed by San Pedro. And we did the second half of it. What was the first ceremony like?
The first ceremony wasn't as enjoyable. Well, it was enjoyable and it wasn't at the same time. Mm-hmm. I tend to get very queasy when I take plant medicines in general. I get nauseous in life very easily in general. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my ayahuasca ceremonies I spend in just vertigo, nausea as stuff gets worked up. That's how my body processes it. Mm-hmm. So the first night, drank it, and as soon as it hit my stomach, instantly wanted to purge, instantly didn't feel good, and just tried to sit through it, ride it out. Couple hours in, the experience started to open up more, and the real big difference was the playfulness that you have here. Every other ceremony I've been in, it's been very, very strict, very quiet, very intense, and not a lot of room for interpretation of things that are happening. And so even though I was uncomfortable, even though I was rolling around and I was nauseous, I was laughing. I was laughing from the center of my being, and then hearing everybody else laugh and hearing everybody being engaged and hearing how you're playing off people and hearing you talk and hearing you playfully talk through what's going on in the body, in the mind, and being able to talk people out of levels of concern. To me, it was one of the most enjoyable experiences in that regard. The actual container was one of my favorite things to go through. Physically, very nauseating, didn't feel good. Finally got to the point where I was able to purge, and then as soon as I purge, my nausea just calms down. So to me, the worst thing that can happen is I don't purge. So, which I have had happen where it can take 1 or 2 ceremonies of it continuously building until it's ready to come out. So I've learned how the medicine works in me, and so I don't get frustrated if it doesn't happen right away. I just know I just need to keep going through it until it finally comes up. So I thoroughly enjoyed the first one. It was the most fun I think I've ever had in an ayahuasca ceremony.
During that time, there's a lot of talk in the space, in the ayahuasca culture, about these wild visions, kaleidoscopic patterns, things talking to people, entities. Is any of that stuff happening in your experience?
Not this trip. This trip, well, it was the geometric patterns, the kind of stereotypical what's in the ether, what's kind of making up the space in between the space. I got a lot of that. When you called in the guides in the second ayahuasca experience, I was so lost in myself that I was face down in my mat, moving around. So I couldn't actually have my eyes up looking around. So I couldn't see what was going on around me. There was just a lot of breathing and a lot of work to keep things moving that it was keeping me very occupied. I have had ceremonies to where I had asked to experience unconditional love and compassion. It was something I felt like I didn't get as a child. And so trying to figure out how to give that to people when I haven't experienced it, that was my second ceremony that I asked for that. And I remember looking up and the top of the Maloka was completely gone. And there were 4 entities that were silhouettes where they didn't have a face. You couldn't see the detail, but you could see and feel them. And I remember just hearing it sounded like a tuning fork or like a swarm of bees where the vibration just started getting so loud. And looking up at them and just feeling this beam of love just to the point where I was sitting up against the back of the wall and I started sliding down as it was pushing me so much that my head started going to the side. And I remember them saying, this isn't to prove it. Like, you wanted to see how strong we are and how much love and compassion there is. This isn't to do anything negative. Like, if you want this to stop, like, we'll stop. And it gave me the option to calm it down. But knowing that, it was like, oh no, like, I'm just going to sit in this. And so it was probably an hour of just this intense beam of love and compassion that was just filling every part of my body up. And I feel like that's what really gave me the ability to know what that can feel like, to then be able to give that to other people.
Amazing. What's the seeing the stuff like? I mean, for someone who's never had this experience, people say they see the air, they see prana, they see density, they see dimension. What is that for you?
It's beautiful. It's geometric shapes of all sorts of different colors. I saw a lot of neon colors, and there was a depth to it. And I even remember at certain points in my experience, you could almost like move through it and you'd see it kind of like shift and move around you. It's a very beautiful experience that gives you a different context to what's possible. And to me, it's almost being able to see things that you normally can't perceive, since you have a layer of receptivity that's open. You have some filters that are opened up that you can't normally process. And so being able to get a different perspective of the universe and the structure of what's going on behind the scenes, to me, was really profound. And again, it's enjoyable as well. It's enjoyable to take in that sight and that just awe and amazement that you could see something this complex and something this complicated that I don't feel like my brain can make up. I feel like it's something that's tangibly actually there around me. I'm just in the state that I can perceive it now.
Have you ever had an experience of what you would call source or God?
Yeah. Really, the second ceremony here was the most I've felt that. When you had called in spirit, you had called in God, you had called in all the support spirits in. And that's where, when I say I get wrung out to my core, that's where I feel like God takes in fills up all of that space. And so to feel it emanating from you and to feel the love and the joy from it and the excitement from God that you remember where you came from, you remember what you are, you remember everything. And so to me, it's a coming back to home. It's a feeling of peace. It's a feeling of being seen and being connected. And so it's ineffable. It's trying to come up with words for it does it such a disservice.
Incredible. I know words are hard, but what is that feeling? Like, just come and have it. Just find
Yeah.
someone who can help you have this feeling.
It's true nirvana. It's true bliss. It's all of the really big buzzwords that are really strong and really powerful. It's that, but so much more tangible because you feel it in every ounce of your being. It's not a conceptualization. It's a felt experience. And I think that's something that gets lost in a lot of people, especially when you're trying to follow somebody else's way, or you're trying to follow an experience that was either had hundreds or thousands of years ago, or an experience that somebody has told you about. You're still going off of somebody else's experience. So once you can have that real tangible experience for yourself, it shifts because now it's real. Now it's not just a story.
I think the hardest part for me early on was understanding that what everybody said about whatever this great mystery is was somebody talking about it, and the mystery itself is found in your own experience.
Yeah.
And then we try to give words to it. Sometimes I try to go back in time in my imagination to the very first ancestor of ours, the very first Homo sapien that felt the need to utter that word. What were they experiencing? Because before then, no human had ever uttered the word source or God or even universe,
Yeah.
right? They haven't even said it yet. So it's like someone's like, and then boom, the word comes out of it. And then since then now, especially in our cultures today, the word about God has become contested.
Yeah.
The thought about God has become contested. And everybody I know who's had the experience that describes it like you, it's so deep, it's so real, it's so visceral, it's so true, and it's so whelming.
Yeah.
It takes over all your senses. It's not like, I had a little meditation with a little conceptualization, you know?
Yeah, before all of this, I was agnostic. I didn't know, but I needed something to actually put the context to. So I've spent the last 11 years trying to prove things wrong to find out what's really true. And the deeper I go, the more and more validity I get in the truth of God and the truth of the experience. So I went in extremely skeptical. I went in trying to poke holes into this. I didn't go in thinking that I was going to find it. I went in very skeptical. So to know that that was my mindset and that I keep getting proved wrong in that belief is actually a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to go. I loved this because you don't have to go in with beliefs.
Yeah.
It's not about what you believe. And you'll come out of it with experience that can then affect how you believe.
Yeah, mine was just purely looking for relief. Just, I've heard that it could get rid of the things that people struggle with. I didn't think it was going to take me this path. I didn't think it was going to have me meet God or meet spirit or any of that. That just happened to be how you get rid of all of the nonsense you're trying to release.
That's a beautiful way of saying that. I don't think people realize that God can be a medicine.
Yeah, that is the medicine.
That is the medicine.
Or it's at least how the medicine works through you and with you.
Yeah. I say everything comes from something. What is that? And that's when we put that word out there. Everything comes from something. And so all the medicines come from that something.
Yeah.
What's integration like?
Integration, I would say, can probably be the most challenging thing for people. I've seen a lot of people struggle with it. Once you get back to normal Western culture in Western society, you're inundated with all of the nonsense of just who people are supposed to be, back to culture, back to society, back to the potential of eating bad foods or drinking alcohol or doing anything that lowers your frequency or your vibration or can bring you back to where you were. So for me, that's where I got really heavy into yoga. Helped me tremendously. I realized that yoga in its truest sense, outside of just the asana practice, is looking for the same thing that I found in ayahuasca. It's trying to find that samadhi. It's trying to find that connection with source. It's trying to also work to remove some of the stuff inside of you. So for me, ayahuasca allowed me to dig deep and to pull out a handful. Yoga as a daily practice allowed me to go in and remove the daily stress that would come up. And then if I did it consecutively enough, I'd go little bit by little bit, continuously going down and pulling up a little bit more. And then that also gave me the time and the space to sit in meditation, and whether it was a seated meditation or a moving meditation, to still strengthen that connection. So I don't know how much more challenging it would have been if I didn't have a practice that I could rely on, because that then opened up the door for another level of learning and context that I could use to continue my own development and understanding of this relationship. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have somebody in your life that has the same kind of understanding, to find a daily practice that you can get into to help you remember and to help keep the stress down and the anxiety down, and brings you back to that present moment, brings you back to that I am, brings you back to just being and not getting caught up in the mind or getting caught up in the daily activities that go on. Because our culture is so sick from the standpoint of needing to prove or needing to show off or needing to own or you need something. There's always something you need in our culture. And if you're not needing something, then you're almost an outcast because everybody else needs something and doesn't understand why you don't. And so if you could have that need be something that you get from within yourself, and breath work works great for that as well. Anything that brings you back to the present moment, anything that brings you back into your body and out of your mind, to me can be massively influential to help that integration period.
I love the idea of incorporating daily practice. When I first was drinking ayahuasca, we were deep in the forest, and you would wake up in the morning in the forest and you'd go do forest things.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go do mind stuff all
Yeah.
day. And the life in the forest is vigorous. You're paddling canoes, you're walking through the forest, you're carrying things, etc. And I love the idea that you have a practice that helps you integrate, that gets you out of the thinking mind. And we use the plant medicine as a catalyst to get things going, but then you keep it going. And I think some people will come to the medicines and think, oh, this is just supposed to heal me and it's all over, but you're supposed to go live your life afterwards and continue that part of the integration. How do you communicate that you've had experiences to friends and family and people who haven't had this experience, or your wife who, you know, might not have been there with you while having the experience itself?
I am just very open, very raw, and it comes from such a genuine place that whether they understand it or not, the response usually is surprise with how open and raw and vulnerable it is, which to me it's doesn't feel like any of those things. It just is. I'm just explaining what I've gone through, and it's exciting for me to share that with people. And so I think the rawness of it for people rings true in some way, even if it's hard for them to conceptualize what's really going on. And then really it's showing up by example, showing up with a layer of compassion, showing up with a layer of calmness, showing up with a layer of presence to where they feel there's a difference, whether it's from how you were before or just how you are compared to the other people that are around. Because that calmness, and especially when you can really see somebody and you can see them where they're at in their struggle and still hold that love and compassion for them, I feel that people can genuinely feel that. Even if they're not fully aware of what's happening, it brings a layer of calmness to them that they don't get from other people. So I think sharing in that energetic exchange can go a long way for helping them realize, okay, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but there's something.
Yeah. I love this idea of just going and being the change you already are.
Yeah.
I found early on, if I tried to tell people I had changed a lot, they would test me to
Yeah.
see whether it was true or not. But I like that if you show them the love and compassion and you just are honest with them about the nature of your experience, then they can feel something different in you, and they can come to you and ask you how you changed or how things got better for you. Other people have showed that too, that they just started radiating their light.
Yeah.
And other people are like, what's that? I want to get me some of that.
Yeah.
And then they asked and they found out, oh, they'd come to plant medicine and had the experience.
And that's always a weird transition where somebody will bring it up depending on the context, or if it's at work, they'll, what about this? Or what are you doing? And it's like, well, it's like, I just went down to the jungle and did some plant medicine, and start looking at you and it's like, are you familiar with ayahuasca at all? Some people are like, yeah. And a lot of people are like, no, I've never heard of it. And it's like, okay, well, kind of test the water, see how you feel about this. And it's just a learning curve on how much to share with people, depending how open they are to it, or just where they're at and how they respond and how they feel energetically about it. So some people I'll go into an entire story. Some people I'll just give them a little bit here and there, and you just kind of feel out on where that person's at within their own psyche and their own awareness of what's possible.
Yeah, early on, I would have people approach me, you know, going through airports or on flights or whatever, and they'd say like, oh, what do you do? You know? Like, and I would just say like, okay, like, do you want to have a conversation that's out of the box?
Yeah.
I'd give them the option, like, would you like to have a conversation that's out of the box? I'd say if not, I can have a conversation that's in the box, right? And they always chose out of the box.
Yeah.
They always did, but by giving them the choice, then when we got out of the box, it wasn't threatening or scary. It was curiosity and awareness. So they knew what they were, they were going to talk about something that isn't normally talked about.
Yeah.
For you with integration, after, a week of ceremonies, how long does it take to find kind of the new normal?
I think it varies on your comfortability and what you've gone through. I would say every time I've gone back from ceremonies, it's been different. It also depends on how well you maintain your physical and energetic self when you get back. I feel you have the afterglow of ayahuasca that I try to hold on to as long as possible. I feel like that really helps that integration. So if I can hold on to that for a couple months, it helps me integrate into my life and then deal with what would normally be more of stressors or more of things I'd be concerned with. And so it takes a couple weeks, and then you start to settle in, you start to kind of get your new rhythm. And especially as the insights and the understandings continue to come in and you continue to work with the lessons that are coming, because you'll still get a lot of growth and a lot of understanding and a lot of conceptual ideas or downloads that will come over the next couple weeks. And it could even be an interaction you have with somebody or a conversation or something happens in traffic and something clicks and you see it differently. It's like, oh, okay, there's something else I can gravitate to. So if you can go back and keep your awareness as broad as possible, and then try to use that in every interaction as a catalyst to continue that growth, it makes that integration that much easier because you're using the real life interactions and the real life situations as catalysts for growth in each moment. And then you learn how to deal and handle that. So now that's in your tool belt. So it makes that time when it comes back around, you've already figured it out, but you've had the help of the medicine in that interim to figure that out. So going back, not just try to slide back into your normal daily life, but try to go into it with the eyes of ceremony. Go into it with the eyes of what else can I learn and how can I navigate this?
I love that you mentioned it could happen in traffic. It can happen in a stoplight. I remember I was on a little motorcycle right in the Plaza de Armas of Cusco, of Iquitos, there with at a red light, and like the epiphany hit. Like I realized it had been the accumulation of many ceremonies.
Yeah.
I love that. If you could say one thing to you now, to the you that was going to go to the very first ayahuasca ceremony over 11 years ago, after everything that's happened, what advice would you be able to give your previous self going into that moment?
Go into it completely open-minded. Go into it with an open heart. Go into it trusting. The more you can go in with trust and the more you can let go of any reason that you give yourself to be fearful or any reason you give yourself for apprehension, and just go into it as open as possible, it's going to make it that much easier. Because I went down with a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear and a belief that I wasn't going to get what I needed out of it once I started having some rough experiences in the beginning. So just knowing to trust. If you can just go down and just trust that things are going to play out and things are going to work out exactly the way they're supposed to, even if it doesn't seem like it, even if things are going wrong in the moment, it's all lining up and preparing for you in a way that you can't see yet. And once you go through the ceremony, you can look back and see why those things happen to give you either a perspective or a context or something. So regardless of what's going to come, just trust in the experience and trust that things are going to line up and you're going to be taken care of.
Out there in the Aya world, normally you hear people drinking in sequences of ceremonies. And I think what Mike shares is really important because often the first couple ceremonies are pretty rough because you're going through the rough stuff inside you, and it doesn't seem like that. It seems like things just got rough.
Yeah.
And so I love this idea. Give yourself time to keep going through it. Let the medicine work. It takes 2, 3, 4, 5 days once you start drinking the medicine for the medicine to process. It processes in your brain at a biochemical level. So working at an atomic molecular level in the physical, and everyone's talked about it in the spiritual, in the quantum, in the energetics as well. So give it that time. Trust in that. Even if the first ones are tough, if you need to take a day off and just skip a ceremony, do it. But don't abandon the path once you've made the decision. And make sure that you stay in, get 2, get 3 ceremonies in. If you're at a place where they do 4 or 5 ceremonies in a week, at least get 3 of them in if you can, and know that the first ones can be a little tough, or if you have like that glorious first one, the second one might also, test the waters a little bit. What's a message you have for, out of everything you've been through, kind of for the world, for humanity, for people to hear?
That I think we're at a point to where we have opportunities like this that are presenting themselves, that we can start to heal as a culture, we can start to heal as a people, that life in general can get so much better, that we don't have to suffer, we don't have to feel isolated, we don't have to feel alone, that there are avenues out there, and it might not be for everybody, but I know for myself, plant medicine has completely changed my life. I'm a massive advocate, and I think that if you can find the right place with the right leader, that they can really take you through an experience that will ultimately change not only your life, but the people in your life, your friends, your family. So even if you're not just doing it for yourself, know that you're doing it for everybody that you care about. And this is going to impact them in so many ways that you can't even imagine.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here on Through the Vine, first I take that in and resonate with that and agree, and thank you for saying that for people to hear. That message needs to be heard more. There's such a dystopian narrative out there, and I think it's baloney. I think humans are making it up. And we need to start telling a much better narrative. And there are tools, and we do have power and capacities to make a difference. And doing that together, how you say it affects the people around you and supports them. Everybody listen to that. And if you can, take that in. Let that resonate inside you. Here we have Through the Vine an audience, and they get to participate, ask questions. And so I want to open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask.
I would love to ask a question. Last night, in our ceremony, there was a point where we invited some galactic beings to do diplomacy, and you said that the framework needed in order for that to happen successfully was for us to first have set up sanctuary. So can you talk a little bit about what sanctuary is? And Mike, I would love to hear your experience of what sanctuary is as well.
So what is sanctuary? Sanctuary is a philosophy and a method to realize our union with the universe, spirit, source, and God, where we equate the universe as part of God, not separate to, not a mythological construct that created the universe, but rather the universe created in itself. And the word sanctuary is literal. We can look it up in the dictionary. It's a refuge, a place of safety and freedom from what causes pain, suffering, and destruction. And the concept is to create a true sanctuary for us, to live in, to explore our consciousness, to be of spirit. And we follow a set of steps of how we invoke it, how we align our consciousness and understanding with the union with spirit, with the union with God, with the infiniteness and eternalness. And then there's 5 simultaneous principles or states that help create it. One is healing, harmonizing, balancing, grounding, and orienting. And if you think about like all these energies that people come, all their internal conflict, if they start balancing and they start grounding and they start harmonizing and they start reorienting, then they start to heal naturally. And healing leads to more. So it's like this big snowball effect, right? And then the final idea is that within this incredible dimensionality of God and within this incredible spirit that we live in, this, which just means the energy, like it's all the energy, the bonds, the electrons, the quantum, all at the same time. In that we're actually protected and safe. And so that's sanctuary. And so we create it. We learn to create it. We're co-creative beings. Everything we do is creative. And we learn to create sanctuary. And as we do that, with plant medicine in an ayahuasca ceremony, we start to merge with the infiniteness of time. We start to merge with the infiniteness of God. And as a collective group, you bring 15, 20 people all together from all over the world, and we start merging in this infiniteness together in this true presence of spirit, and we start to create ceremony and sanctuary together. So all our energies start to balance and ground and orient and harmonize, and it happens individually, it happens collectively with people that have just met each other. It's a phenomenal experience to be a part of. This real deep communion between people that happens at the soul level and spirit level and even mind level, where we hear of each other and we commune, we come together for this. And part of this is finding a way to make peace. And in all of our mythological stories, there's all these beings that are in macro conflict. And so I like to, in ceremony, to these macro beings, give them the opportunity to find their peace. So it'd be like inviting, Zeus and Athena and Ganesha and Shiva and Isis and Osiris, like these great beings, like give them an opportunity for them to find their peace. And their stories are all in these different conflicts, and some are, said to be from astral places. Well, give them a chance. Give them a chance to find their peace. But they won't find their peace if we haven't found it ourselves. If we can't demonstrate it, why should they? Right, so first, we find it ourselves. And so in that ceremony, I was waiting until there was the expression of mutual gratitude in all directions and the exclamation of universal love, like where the hearts have opened up, everybody to each other. And then I thought after that, it's time to invite everybody else in for some peace, because we had demonstrated it as a group.
And to me, that's when it shifted, because I remember laying there in that just ecstatic love and gratitude, and then it felt like there was just a grid of energy that dropped down and just filled the entire Maloka. And that's where it felt like as soon as that dropped down, I was just surrounded by it. There was no getting away from it. It was just cleansing every aspect of every part of me. So that's what I've never felt before in a ceremony. Is it didn't feel like it was always just an individual thing that was happening. And with this, it just encompassed everything all around. And so it was extremely profound.
I think that it's beautiful to hear all around, because the first tenet is in, through, and all around. And so it's really seeing it everywhere. There isn't one little subatomic space that is somehow left out inside us, and all the way through us in all directions, omnidirectional and all around us. And it's coming into the awareness of it and just accepting it.
Be doing more San Pedro ayahuasca ceremonies, and Mike, are you willing, is this something that you would come back and do here as well?
I have already put in my application to come back in January. So I am hoping I'll be back in January, and that way I can bring my wife with me and give this experience to her as well.
So the question is, will there be more ayahuasca into San Pedro? Think of it as one ceremony. You start in the evening, and the ayahuasca has its own natural arc, and then you get some sleep, and then you wake up and the ceremony continues. So you sleep in ceremony and the ceremony continues, and then the San Pedro part of the ceremony starts. And there will definitely be more. In January, we have a retreat in the Sacred Valley, and you can see it at bluemorphotours.com. And I'm so in love with this. I want to do this a lot. This has been fantastic. And I know that I'm a big proponent of how great it is, but this has really been special in a very unique way. And I express today my gratitude to everyone here for being such amazing souls to come together to do this. And I would love to do more of it. So I think there's going to be a lot of exploration of this. What I particularly like, especially going into the second one, was where we started. It was how we started the second ayahuasca ceremony. It was like that long San Pedro had prepared us for it. And we were really ready. So a lot of times when you go into second ayahuasca on retreats, there's a lot of fear. people are pretty scared because of what happened on the first night, and they're processing, and they come with a lot of fears. This San Pedro was like a warm, soft blanket on pillows, preparing us. It had like soothed us, and so much heart energy soothed us to go into that second ceremony. I think that's why it allowed us such stability together and cohesion. And so I really like that and look forward to doing this more often.
So oftentimes after doing the 4 ceremonies, say in ayahuasca ceremonies in a week, at the end of it, you're pretty worn out because you put yourself through it. Mike, how are you feeling at the end of the 2 ceremonies of the pairing of the medicines?
I feel great. I don't feel exhausted or burnt out or fatigued. I don't feel as like I went through as much as doing the 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. I feel like the San Pedro really helps smooth it out and make the after effect easier.
Yeah, I feel energized.
Yeah, very energized.
Yeah, instead of feeling spent.
Yeah.
Typically after 4 ayahuasca ceremonies in a row, you feel like you need a break, like you need to rest. This feels like we could rest tonight, and tomorrow we could kick it off again and feel ready.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for being here with us. Thank you, Mike, for coming on Through the
Thank
Vine
you.
and sharing your stories. I appreciate it. And thank you for being such a beautiful advocate for the plant medicine space and for ayahuasca, and so openly sharing the nature of your experiences. That's what this podcast is all about. It's about learning and understanding this incredible network of people that have been brought together because of both need and this glorious plant medicine that has been part of our human ancestral lineages for thousands and thousands of years. And so we'll continue to bring these stories. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure.